A zombie rises from the ground to seek revenge on those who stole his necklace. Little do they know just how brutal and ruthless he can be in taking their lives. At the start of the movie, a group of friends stumbles upon a locket hanging on a fire tower. Troy, one of the friends, decides to take it, though another friend warns him not to, having heard a frightening story about this place. Soon after, the corpse of a man named Johnny rises from the ground. He appears to have been dead for a long time and seems to be reanimated by the presence of the locket. Filled with anger, he begins searching for the locket, heading into the forest. On his way, he stops at a decaying fox carcass that had been caught in a trap. As Johnny continues, he overhears an argument between two men nearby, one of whom set the traps responsible for the fox's death. One of the men leaves, unaware he's abandoned his friend to a deadly fate. As Johnny moves closer, it becomes clear his body is covered in horrific scars, giving him a grotesque and terrifying appearance. In a rage, Johnny enters a nearby house, discovering the necklace that once belonged to him. This discovery triggers memories of his mother. The homeowner, terrified at the sight of the monstrous figure, tries to flee and calls for help, but no one is around to save him. In his panic, he trips over one of the hunter's traps. Johnny catches up to him and kills him mercilessly, chopping up his body without an ounce of pity. Johnny is a cold-blooded killer, completely devoid of sympathy. Afterward, Johnny picks up his locket, examines it briefly, then drops it and returns to the woods. The next day, Johnny approaches the same group of friends, who are sitting around a campfire. Aaron, one of the friends, begins to tell a tragic story about Johnny. Years earlier, Johnny, who faced learning challenges, had been tricked into climbing a tall fire tower, thinking he'd find toys at the top. Instead, someone had frightened him so badly that he fell to his death. Although officially deemed an accident, local legends tell of Johnny's spirit seeking revenge through two separate killing sprees over the years. After hearing the tale, the group hurriedly heads into their cabin, unnerved by what they've just heard. Little do they know that Johnny himself is lurking right outside. Later, the friends are joking around and begin teasing Aaron, who heads off into the forest on his own. But Johnny follows him, eventually catching up and killing him brutally, severing his head from his body. Johnny then drags Aaron's body to a nearby park ranger's office, throwing the severed head at the window to shatter the glass. Inside, Johnny gathers a pair of hooks, an axe, and an old firefighter mask. The following day, Johnny finds Aurora and Brody by a lake. Brody goes for a swim, while Aurora stays onshore to do yoga. Brody attempts to lighten Aurora's mood, suggesting they do yoga together, but she remains distant. Johnny, now lurking in the water, readies himself for his next target. Moments later, Aurora hears a scream as Brody begins to drown. Eventually, his lifeless body surfaces, pierced with an arrow. Johnny emerges from the lake and disappears back into the forest. Johnny then sets his sights on Aurora, who's practicing yoga by a cliff. Seeing him, she panics and tries to escape but finds herself trapped with a ditch behind her. Taking advantage of the situation, Johnny uses his hooks to stab her, killing her before tossing her body over the cliff. Johnny has truly become a merciless beast, showing no compassion for his victims. After this brutal act, Johnny again disappears into the woods. As he walks through the forest, Johnny pauses, grabs an axe from a tree, and continues forward. Later, Troy, Colt, and Evan argue over their car keys and their missing friends. In frustration, they throw each other's keys into the woods. Johnny comes across one of the keys lying on the ground, with a small car-shaped keychain attached. He sits down by a tree, removes his mask to reveal his terrifying face, and begins playing with the key. Nearby, he hears the voices of a girl and a boy talking. Believing that Aaron might have gone to meet them, Chris and Colt decide to search for him, heading out on an ATV. After a while, the friends realize their key is missing and begin searching for it. Johnny, noticing their distress, puts on his mask, grabs a stick, and places it against the car horn, causing it to blare loudly. Taking advantage of the distraction, Johnny hooks the man who took the necklace, injuring his leg, and keeps the stick on the car horn to keep the noise going. One of the friends fires 2 shots into Johnny's chest, knocking him down momentarily. He then bandages his injured friend's ankle, and the group leans on each other, attempting to leave the area. But Johnny quickly recovers, rising with his axe and striking at them, killing one with a rock and delivering a deadly blow to the man in the blue shirt. Soon after, Chris and Colt discover their fallen friends, realizing they've been killed. Overcome with grief, they're in tears when Johnny approaches. At this point, Johnny realizes the necklace is now with the girl. He attacks her, but she and Colt manage to escape on a vehicle. Later that night, Johnny returns to the ranger station, where Colt and the ranger discuss that the necklace was the only thing preventing Johnny from waking up from an endless sleep. It now needs to be returned to its rightful place. Confronting Johnny, the ranger asks if he remembers his past deeds from a decade ago, then shoots him in the chest, bringing him down once more. The ranger explains that White Pine was indeed massacred and that Johnny had once been subdued by his father, a survivor who had put Johnny into his long sleep. The ranger then orders Colt to retrieve a chain from the ranger fire tower to restrain Johnny. However, as they move to secure him, Johnny regains consciousness and attacks the ranger. The ranger, in his last moments, urges Colt and the girl to flee. After killing the ranger, Johnny ties him with the chain and drags him to a machine, where he uses it to brutally dismember the body before setting off in search of his next victims. When Johnny eventually locates Colt and Chris, they call out to him, prepared with a final plan to face this relentless killer. As Johnny approaches, they are terrified. Colt, realizing what needs to be done, sacrifices himself, facing off against Johnny with no idea of the danger he's in. Johnny strikes with his axe, crushing Colt's face in a single blow. Chris watches in horror, frozen by the brutal sight. Chris, who has the locket, quietly removes it and places it on a large bottle as she opts to flee. She runs, but in her haste, her feet are badly injured. With great difficulty, Chris manages to survive and finally escapes the forest by morning, reaching a nearby road. She sees a car approaching and signals it to stop. A woman steps out, helps Chris into the car, and takes her to the hospital. Chris, still in shock, sits quietly as the woman reassures her, saying everything will be okay and offering her something to eat. The woman gently asks Chris what happened, but Chris is initially silent. After a long pause, she finally says, "He's a devil who looks like a human." Hearing this, the woman reveals that something similar happened to her brother 30 years ago. He worked in the forest, and they believed a demon might have killed him. Many other strange incidents followed after that. As they continue driving, Chris loses consciousness from excessive blood loss. Concerned, the woman repeatedly calls her name to bring her back. She then stops the car to bandage Chris's injured feet, hoping to control the bleeding. They are still surrounded by the forest, and Chris feels an overwhelming fear, worried that Johnny might reappear. She watches the tree line anxiously as the woman wraps her wounds, but this time, Johnny does not return. He has gone back to where he belongs. Johnny had emerged only for the locket, and when Chris abandoned it in the forest, he returned with it. It was his purpose to guard the locket, and in doing so, he had claimed many lives. So that's the end of our movie. If you've come this far, make sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe my channel.